So the next talk is on efficient length doubling from Tweakable block ciphers, which is work by Yulong Shen, Atul Luijs, Bart Benning, and Bart Beneel. And Yulong will be giving the talk.
Thank you. This work is about efficient length doubling from Tweakable block ciphers, and it's joint work by Atul Luijs, Bart Benning, and Bart Beneel. So one of the most important building blocks in cryptography is block cipher. However, it's limited by the fixed block size n, so we can only have fixed length encryption. If we want to encrypt any message with length other than n, we need to use a block cipher in so-called mode of operation, like the CPC mode. But now, suppose n is equal to 128 bits, and if I want to encrypt a message of 200 bits, how can I do that? One of the solutions is using the padding technique. So let's explain the case of CPC mode. We first pad the bit string of 200 bits in multiple times of n, then we use the CPC mode. However, there's a disadvantage with this method, namely the ciphertext expansion. We will have a ciphertext where the length of the ciphertext is always larger than the length of the original plaintext. We can use the following methods to avoid ciphertext expansion. The first one is using the counter mode, but the counter mode turns block cipher into a string cipher, so it's not always suitable for any applications. We can also use one of those non-generic methods. Those methods preserve the length of the ciphertext and make sure that the length of the preserve the length of the plaintext and make sure the length of the ciphertext will be the same as the length of the original plaintext. But those methods are non-generic methods, so it cannot turn an enciphering scheme into an encryption scheme for arbitrary length messages. We can also use ciphertext stealing, and let's again explain it with the CPC mode. So we have a bit string for example, 200 bits. We pad it, use the CPC mode, then we truncate the ciphertext block CL-1 to the same length as the incomplete block. At the end, we just swap this truncated block with the last ciphertext block. Ciphertext stealing cannot be used separately, so it can only be applied with some mode of operation. But this leads to the following condition, namely, ciphertext stealing can only be applied to mode of operations where the ciphertext block can be decrypted and decrypted independently of each other. So, do we also have better methods to encrypt, for example, a bit string of 200 bits? The answer is using length doublers. Length doubler can turn n bits enciphertext scheme into an encryption scheme that can encrypt every bit string between n to 2n-1 bits. So in the past, XLS was the first length doubler proposed in the literature by Wiesenhart and Squadre in 2007. It uses 3 block cipher calls and 2 epsilon root mixing functions. But it was broken by Nandy in 2014. The second one is DE, proposed by Nandy in 2009. But it's quite complex, so it uses 1 block cipher call, 1 weak pseudo-random function, and 2 hash function calls. The last one was proposed by John in 2012. But it also uses 5 cryptographic primitive calls, 2 block cipher calls, and 3 hash function calls, and 1 epsilon root mixing function. Not in the case of John, the hash function HK5 takes as input the length of the incomplete block, so it can be calculated in advance. but then we still have 4 cryptographic primitive codes. So if we look at the state of the art, we can ask the following 2 questions. Do we really need at least 4 cryptographic primitive codes to achieve, to build a secure length doubler? And we can see the existing length doubler, okay, except XLS because it was broken. So DE and 10 both had birthday-bound security. So can we also have beyond the birthday-bound security? The answer on this question is of course yes, otherwise I will not be here. For our paper, we want to construct a more efficient and more secure length doubler. We can achieve this goal by using Tweakable block ciphers and a simple form of mixing function than the absolute mixing function. But even with a length doubler, we can only encrypt bit strings between n and 2 n minus 1. So it's easy to encrypt a message of 200 bits, but what if I have a message of 400 bits? So in our paper, we combined our construction with a scheme for integral length messages to achieve a scheme for arbitrary length messages. So explanation about the building blocks. Tweakable block cipher is actually an extension of a conventional block cipher. It takes extra inputs, the tweak key, and for every different tweak key, we will have an independent permutation. So it gives more flexibility because by the fact that the key K is a private parameter, while the tweak T is actually public. Here are a few examples of the previous dedicated and modular design of Tweakable block ciphers. As I already mentioned before, we used a mixing function that's simpler than absolute mixing function. For absolute mixing function, the security of this function depends on the value of epsilon. So the smaller the epsilon, the better the security. But for our construction, we don't need such strong mixing function, so we can just use something we call the pure mixing function. Note that every absolute mixing function is also a pure mixing function, but it's not always the same in the other direction. So that makes a pure mixing function is much easier to construct than the absolute mixing function. For our construction, we can just use the most simple pure mixing function, the swap function. Now, the security definition. Suppose we have an adversary who wants to distinguish our length doubler from random. Then, in the beginning of the attack game, he gets access to one of the 2 random oracles. If he gets the real-world oracle, then this is actually the proposed length doubler, and the ideal world oracle is actually something we call a random length preserving permutation. So the adversary A makes Q queries to the given oracle. If the given oracle is the real-world oracle, then if he enters a plaintext, he will get corresponding ciphertext. And if he enters the ciphertext, then he will get the corresponding plaintext. So if he gets access to the ideal world oracle, then in both cases he will just get a length preserving random permutation of the input. So after its communication with the given oracle, he needs to say which world it is interacting with. If he cannot do that, we can say that the proposed construction is actually a strong length preserving pseudo-random permutation. And note the advantage of adversary to distinguish the proposed construction from random depends on the number of the query queue. So if the value of Q increase, then his advantage will increase too. Now, our construction LDT, it uses 2 Tweakable block cipher calls, one pure mixing function, and note that the decryption function is similar to the encryption function. So suppose n is equal to 128 bits, and we want to encrypt a bit stream of 200 bits. The first 128 bits of this bit stream records M1, and the remaining bits records M2. We first pass M2 and use it as the trig input of the first Tweakable block cipher. And then we use the pure mixing function to swap the incomplete block M2 and M3, which has the same length as M2. And after that, we use the incomplete block of the ciphertext C2 and pad it and use it as the twig for the second Tweakable block cipher, and to output the first 128 bits of the resolving ciphertext. So at this moment, LDT achieved birthday bound security, but we strongly believe that it's possible to have beyond the birthday bound security. A little explanation about the security of our construction. As mentioned before, we can prove that our construction have birthday bound security if the used Tweakable block cipher is secure. We prove it with Bartran's edge coefficient technique. I'm not going to explain it. You just need to know that the advantage of the adversary is bounded by the blue term epsilon. It's the green chance. It's actually the chance to have bad transcripts in the ideal world. So in our case, this chance is equal to 0, and our epsilon is equal to q squared divided by 2 to the power n. Note that this epsilon has nothing to do with the epsilon and the epsilon good mixing function. Those are two different epsilons. And as mentioned before, we believe that we will have beyond the birthday bound security because we also found an attack on our scheme that gives a security upper bound of 2 to the power n minus s divided by 2. The attack is based on, okay, I'm going to explain the attack now. So the adversary needs to distinguish LDT by random, and he can reduce his advantage to distinguish truncated LDT from the truncated pseudo-random length preserving pseudo-random permutation, and this advantage is upper bounded by the advantage to distinguish truncated LDT from a random function, and the advantage to distinguish the random function from a truncated version of length preserving random permutation, and those are the results. We can see if S is large, then this term can be ignored, and then we only have this term left. So, and this term is equal to the security upper bound. Here a table of comparison. We can see that LDT compares favorable, especially in the case of key size and in the case of the number of cryptographic primitive calls. And as long as we use the dedicated Tweakable block ciphers like Skinny or Tweaky, actually as long as the sum of the two Tweakable block cipher evaluation is cheaper than the sum of the 4 cryptographic primitive evaluation in the case of DE and HEM. And note that we also use a pure mixing function. It makes our construction a little more efficient. And if we use a pure mixing function in HEM, then it will make HEM insecure. So, as I already mentioned, we will also build a scheme for arbitrary data based on our construction, and a scheme for authenticated encryption scheme for integral data. So, with this scheme for integral message data, we use this tag output as the first n bit of the input of our construction to output puts the ciphertext of incomplete block and the tag, and we can prove that it has birthday-bound security. So conclusion, in this paper we have a birthday-bound security with 2 Tweakable block cipher calls and 1 pure mixing function. And based on that, we built an authenticated encryption scheme for arbitrary length data. For the future, we can see if this scheme will has beyond birthday-bound security and how the security will behave in the case of multiple rounds. And maybe there are other optimizations like using the same key for the both Tweakable block ciphers. And thank you for your attention.
Any questions? So, you mentioned the gap between the security that you proved, the low bound and the upper bound. Do you know what you're feeling where the actual security will lie?
Yeah, actually, I already know it's do have. So in our next work, we do find the beyond birthday bounds of this scheme, but we still don't really have the tight bonds. So it's very close to the outer bonds, but it's still, but it's not tight. But it is beyond the birthday bond security. So it's the only thing that I can say at this moment.
Any other questions? No, let's thank the speaker again.